Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It is the 15th episode of the Progress Pondcast with me, Brendan Squire, and my co-host, Martin Longman. We have a special guest today. We told you we were going to have more guests. We have State Rep Joe Hohenstein from right here in Philadelphia. He's got a lot to say, I'm sure, on a bunch of topics. I won't keep you long. I'll just say hello, everybody. Hello, Martin, and hello, Joe. How y'all doing this fine Sunday?
Pretty good, Brendan. Pretty good.
We are doing really well, Brendan. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I go back to school. Well, I've been over at right up the street from Joe's offices. We went back for professional development, and the children are coming back on Monday, and I am bracing for that. Marty, your guy's already off at school already, isn't he?
No. We're bracing for his first day of high school tomorrow.
No way.
Yeah, and we got
God.
a big picnic at 3:00. So it's like
He's ninth grade.
Ninth grade, trying to pull it all together and get everything all set up for school and soccer and everything. So,
Joe, I know you as my state rep, but do you have kids? I don't even know if you have kids.
My kids are older, 30 and 27. They're out of the house. But with middle school, my dad did do a stint there in a summer school program when he was a teacher in the public school system in Philly.
It's quite a school over there. So that said, like I said, I didn't, my kid is 20 and is in college, starting second year of computer science, which is really, really good. But hey, let's get into the politics. Marty, has there been anything on your radar before we start asking Joe questions and peppering him and asking him this, that, the other thing? Because I've got a little rant I want to go on before we get started, but if you got something else, you can jump in yourself.
There was just one thing in the news today that I noticed and made me laugh, which was, okay, so the Democratic convention is over and Trump needs to get some attention back on himself. And he went down to Arizona to the border, and the border should be one of his better issues, immigration. And he went down there to highlight that. And the problem is he went to a section of the border where the wall was built by the Obama administration. And he stood in front of that wall. But then that wall was, not complete. So there's this part of the wall next to it that's incomplete. And that's his part of the wall.
It's like all bashed up and stuff.
No, it's just like
not even there.
There's like some panels up and then others aren't. And then there's like a whole bunch of rusting panels like sitting over here. Right. So obviously anybody can just walk right across the border there.
It's like they started the project and never finished.
Right. But he was highlighting, look at this. I built this beautiful wall. Look at this wall behind me that I built. It's beautiful. And look over here, this rusting pile of crap that the Obama didn't build and Biden didn't build and Harris didn't build. And it's exactly the opposite. It's the beautiful wall he's standing in front of is the one Obama built. The thing that's like lying there rusting is what he was responsible for. And the best part of it was, I read this in the Washington Post, and the reporter was down there and he was riding around in a pickup truck with a Trump supporter. And the Trump supporter's like kind of just smacking his head like, how do you screw up this bad? Like, you could go to all these different parts of the wall that are Trump walls and you go to the Obama part. It's just like he can't, even when he's got an issue that he could just completely just take it and run with it and not exaggerate or anything. He screws it up and he has to lie about it.
Oh yeah.
So he's standing there lying. This wall behind me is mine. No, it's not. This pile of crap over here is Obama's. No, that's yours. And, even his own supporters.
If you think about it, though, that's kind of par for the course for the Republicans. I mean, Joe Biden spent a good chunk of his of the last few months when he was still campaigning, calling out Republicans for taking credit for the IRA acts that they voted against. That they were
Right.
like, no, that they voted against, and now they're still like, the likes of Lauren Boebert standing out front being like, yay, da da da, like taking credit
Yeah.
for something that she actually voted no on. And that's been a
Right.
thing for a long time.
Yeah,
That was going on when Obama was president.
absolutely. I look at this beautiful new bridge that I voted against,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. I got one little bit that I gotta talk about, and as you know, I've been reading the Washington Post. I switched from the Washington Post a couple years ago from the New York Times because I just really, Joe, I don't know how much you online you pay attention to this, but there's been a long standing grievance, I think, in progressive and more lefty spheres that the New York Times has not exactly been a fair an honest broker with the Democrats. I mean, especially with Trump versus Biden, where it's all, oh, Biden is old, Biden is old, Biden is old, Biden is old. Trump goes on some meltdown and they're like, Trump proposes unique economic plan. And it's like, come on. And
Right.
so I've drifted away from the New York Times, got tired of that coverage. And the Washington Post has largely been better, but they've recently been I think their editor in chief, is that who it is? It got recruited from the Daily Mail, which is a far right paper in Britain.
I think it was
And
actually the UK Telegraph, but same
something like
thing.
that.
Same thing.
They're
Very far, very conservative British newspaper. In the Rupert Murdoch grouping of publications.
And they've all, like the Times, they always have their liberal and conservative coverage, and some people are always better than others, but my God, their recent crop of you want to talk about DEI hires, it's they were recruited specifically because they're Republican, not because they actually have it, or conservative. They don't really have anything good to say. They're not interesting. They're just there. We need a conservative. There's binders full of them. Let's get some of those. And one of the guys they've pulled on, who's actually been around for a while, is this fella Matt Bai. Do you know that name? BAI?
Yeah.
I do not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marty, was he a Bush writer at some point? I know he had something to do with the GWB.
I don't know. I know him as a reporter for the New York Times.
Yeah, maybe that's how I know him. But he's been well, here's an example, non Matt Bai, that I just wanted to highlight real quick. And then I'll jump into my grievance with him, and then Joe, we can start talking, get into the
Sounds good.
meat of this. There's a column they'll do in the Washington Post where it's just basically it's kind of like brief hits about what's gone on over the course of the day. Convention day 4, Harris is doing this guy's doing that, things to watch out for. And they had this headline, Election 2024 live updates. Trump aims to steal back spotlight after Democrats convention week. So I start going down the column to see what's going on. And there's a whole bunch about what Harris and Walz are doing. There's a whole bunch about what this person's doing here, but there's absolutely not there's one line about Trump, about how he held 2 rallies in swing states, and that's it. But they focus on Trump in the headline for no reason at all. The whole gist of the column is, here's what's going on the trail. Here's what's going on the trail. Testers over here. So-and-so fights, slipping. Harris ahead in the polls. Walz this, blah, blah, blah. There's no reason for Trump to be in there. He's not even included in the substance of the article. But there's like this knee-jerk thing to just bring the name into it because it keeps the focus on the guy. And it's just not something I'm very happy with. The other thing, to keep picking on him, and you and I shared these photos with you. I was reading Matt Bai's columns, and he's like kind of like this. I guess he's kind of centrist. I would say center right kind of guy.
I looked it up. His background is he used to be the chief political columnist for the New York Times Magazine, and the chief correspondent, and before that, or maybe after that, for Yahoo News. So yeah, his commentary for the Washington Post is kind of a new role. He used
Yeah.
to be, a correspondent.
And he's been doing this so long, he's kind of got like media, I don't even know what to call it. It's like this kind of a lot of these folks, I feel like they're in this mindset where nothing matters. Nothing matters and words don't matter and just nothing matters anymore. And he's writing about he was doing this column about how Trump has grown boring, that Trump's act is stale. And thank you for writing that column. It's an opinion column. Trump's act is getting stale, which is true. But he throws into this thing about how like Kamala Harris is now, and then Democrats have the momentum. But he has this line that I was just like, it just says so much about the columnist without the columnist realizing what he's saying about himself. It may have been tragic to watch Biden slowly lose his grip on his party, but it was also addictively entertaining.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm reading this and I'm like, what the hell kind of person are you? How is it entertaining? I mean, like, watching Biden stumble was upsetting.
Painful.
It was
Painful.
it was painful.
Yeah.
It was upsetting.
Yes.
It was the start of a whole argument and despair, to be honest. But
Well, I mean, Joe, uh, is it ever entertaining to watch somebody age and start to lose some of their mental acuity? I mean,
in all honesty,
yeah.
if we look at how the media has changed, this is an aspect of it. The idea that there is entertainment that is factored into the equation when they're looking at what stories are they going to run, what emphasis are they going to have. It's the car wreck analogy. The idea that everybody rubbernecks when something kind of crazy is going on, like a car accident, and they just got to be able to see for themselves. And I think that was what was going on with Biden. I think it's going to happen over the next 80 some odd days or more, if Trump continues to try to press any election result. But it's going to happen with Trump as well.
Oh yeah, he's
because
already you can see him decompensating.
Yeah, there's already that space where he's, like you said earlier, Martin, showing up at a section of wall that isn't his, pretending like it's his. So if we're talking about, is that something that entertaining, if we think of entertainment as something that's going to attract attention, oh yeah. And that, unfortunately, what a lot of the media is driven around. And one of the concerns I know with the new Washington Post leadership is certainly on the political spectrum realm. It is a more conservative move, but what it also is a more sensationalist move.
Yeah.
I think the British paper he came from was a tabloid that was known for its sensationalism, and
exactly.
the idea that sometimes the most important thing was to get the clicks.
Yes.
Which is exactly what that headline that you were just talking about is all about, Brendan.
Yeah. It's all about getting the clicks. Yep.
Yeah.
Throw Trump in there.
Yeah, and I think, and then what we have to be on guard for is to recognize that media is currently constructed this way, and it's a twofold problem. One of this entertainment aspect, the clickbait that they're looking for, and also the bias that makes them ignore facts and makes them either focus on facts that don't matter, or frankly, just bypass what the truth is. And those are the things that we really have to be on guard with when we're talking about what's happening in the media and the fourth estate.
Yep. Speaking of facts, we have buried the lead. We introduced you, but we didn't get into where all your other stuff. We got off on our tangents, but we kind of do that here at the show anyway. Joe Hohenstein, give us some Joe Hohenstein facts. Where you rep, when you got started, who you replaced. Give us the Joe Hohenstein synopsis.
Okay.
Joe Hohenstein's elevator speech in a nutshell.
There we go. So I'm from the neighborhood that I am currently representing from Frankfurt. Although my mom and dad's house is not in the district, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so I represent what folks would call the River Wards of Philadelphia, which Port Richmond, Fishtown, Bridesburg. Also, as you go up the river, Tacony, Wissinoming, pieces of Frankfurt and Kensington as well. And this is a district that was and always has been Democratic registration leaning, but for 30 some odd years, it was represented by a moderate Republican. And I eventually decided to run against him in 2016, lost, but then in 2018, I ran again and he retired. And we had a few different races at that time. Some of them, again, had some of that entertainment value we were just talking about. And but I just tried to do what I always do, which is go talk to people. So one of the things I always try to connect with people is right where they are. And when I was campaigning, that's a lot of door knocking, a lot of meeting people in their houses. Since I've been in office, it's trying to run a constituent services office that is welcome to everybody. We don't ask political affiliations. We just say, what's the problem that you need help with and how can we help you with it? And then we go about doing that and trying to make sure that people feel connected to their government, because as a state rep, I represent one of the smallest constituencies, about 65,000 people.
Oh, wow.
So I've got a chance to have strong interpersonal relationships with constituents in a way that a lot of other elected officials can't. Simply because if you think about city council, they're 3 times as large as us. State Senate also, almost 3.5 times as large as us. Congressional reps, even more. So when I look at how I interface with my constituents' real lives, it's, again, making sure that services get provided. When we talk issues, though, and we're looking at the political world, I try to give them the perspective that I can in a real life kind of way that, frankly, I don't know that they're able to get from their other elected officials just because of the size that districts are in the current formats.
Can you give me an example like of what that real world kind of stuff looks like?
One of the most important connections I made was early on in my first term. At the beginning of 2019, we decided to have a Narcan training event at Bridesburg Recreation Center. And Bridesburg is essentially the heart of the most conservative area of my district.
I'm in Bridesburg. For those of you listening at home, I'm in Bridesburg right now. My dad has better Wi-Fi than I do in Port Richmond, just a couple blocks. This name, for those of you who are not Pennsylvania or Philly people, Philly is a city of neighborhoods. Some of our neighborhoods are literally only a few blocks long, and or a few, not even a mile or two. I can walk from my dad's neighborhood to my neighborhood, and probably about 15-minute walk. So and
Yeah.
it all these neighborhoods that Joe is talking about, they're all along the Delaware River. That's why it's called the River Wards. And yeah,
Yep.
and Bridesburg
Yeah.
is extremely conservative. Oh my Lord.
Yeah, conservative, but they have the same opiate problem as everybody else.
Yep.
Exactly. Exactly. That and geographically, Brendan, so that people understand, there are 3 ways in and out of Bridesburg.
Yep.
So it does have a geographic isolation as well.
It's a little
Sometimes
enclave.
as a political one, but it is a very strong, tight knit neighborhood. But it does have, like Martin just said, the same struggles that everyone has had with the opioid problems. And we all focus in Philly on Kensington Avenue, which is where all of the open air, the drug market is happening. And I do have a piece of that neighborhood as well. But one of the things that people didn't and still don't realize is a large number, over half actually, of overdose deaths are happening in people's homes. So we had a Narcan training event in Bridesburg. And it was at that event that I made one of the strongest connections with one of the most conservative community leaders that has stood the test of time over these last 5 or 6 years that I've been in office, because she and I have recognized a common goal of community safety and being able to have people's lives be better in whatever way we were trying to. And that sometimes that did cross over into a particular political policy. But a lot of times it was just simply making sure that we were both present and being able to speak to a situation. And in many instances, actually, in the past few years, she and I have been in meetings together where people were looking to each of us from different perspectives to see whether the thing that needed to be done, on this block or with this construction of new development, that what was it that that we were both thinking, because they respected us both, and maybe some respected her more and some respected me more, but it was that idea. And so that's one of the things that I was able to do, because again, as a state rep, I can build those relationships. I can take the time to get to know community leaders, have coffee with them on a regular basis, have their cell phone numbers, give them my cell phone number, and things work.
It's amazing how local issues that aren't being hyped, distorted on the national level or on Fox News or in right-wing media or even left-wing media, like when people aren't injecting all of this from the outside onto it, and you're talking about Republicans and Democrats talking about their schools or their roads or Narcan, the opioid problem. Like, it's so much easier for people to work together and to
Right.
maintain that respect. And it's like, because there's not all this poison coming in from the outside, which is one of the reasons I get upset when I see these kind of national organized efforts to go in and mess around with school board meetings, because that's messing up something that's not broken, right? Like, most of our politics are broken. A lot where we still get along, when we get along, is at the local level. So I get really upset when I see people coming in and trying to screw that up too. And you can't even go to your local school board meeting without somebody from out of town coming in and screaming at the administrators and stuff.
It has been heartening to see at least in a number of the counties, suburban collar counties around Philadelphia, to see that a lot of those crazy people were kicked out. The
Yeah.
didn't Bucks County kind of realized they made a mistake with those in a bunch of districts, and wasn't there like a fairly clean sweep where it was just like, nope, you guys are gone, and
Oh
took a
yeah, we
big
covered that in one of our earlier
yeah.
podcasts where there was that teacher that was advocate for gay kids, and he had gotten like
Yeah, he got fired or
accused of
whatever.
civil rights. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the
So
same district with
anyway,
it.
yeah.
That was also with the crazy lady who had the Moms for Liberty type. She wasn't Moms for Liberty, but she was similar. And shit, it turned out she'd been having like keg parties, drunken
Oh
brawls
yeah.
at her house with teenagers.
Oh God, that's right. She was
Well,
serving booze to everybody and then
um,
fighting the kids.
Fighting the kid, grandma's involved.
That was great.
yeah.
So
Well,
one thing with,
one of the ways that I got connected in on some of that stuff actually is a series of bills that I've been one of the prime movers on to what we're calling it safe schools for all. And it came out of a lot of school districts in central PA, in particular the Lancaster Lidditz area, where people were seeing some of these movements and then some of the policies that we're following. And you said, we've seen it in Central Bucks with anti-gay, anti-trans policies, policies that really weren't looking to make kids safer, but to prohibit books and those kinds of things. So
yes.
I had a group of trans advocates come to me, and they did so because they know that I'm the parent of a trans person, and they knew that again, as a legislator, I had some ability and some power to use my bully pulpit to lift up the issues, which is one of the ways that I look at how I've also got to legislate. We were just talking about the local stuff, but on some of these larger issues, my role as a legislator is to lift up things that other people might not think about lifting up, or might not be in a position of strength, or frankly not brave enough to do so. And I don't know how brave I am, because I haven't done it all the time when I've been a legislator, but I've tried to stand up for what I know is right. And in this instance, what we did was we sat down with this organizing group, got 4 basic ideas, and then worked with our legislative drafters, and we put together 4 bills that are focused on a curriculum that would be centered around LGBTQ plus people and issues, a locker room and bathroom equity bill, an anti-bullying bill, and then I always forget what the 4th issue was, but we were again just trying to make sure that trans kids, and in particular, but LGBTQ kids, as a broader community, were able to feel safe and secure in the places that they're supposed to go and learn. And this is one of the ways that I try to have an impact as a legislator. And it's one of the characteristics, I think, of my style of legislating, which is I try to recognize where there are gaps in advocacy and to step in to be an ally for a marginalized group. Because frankly, my own background isn't one where I have too much, in which I'm in a marginalized community. I'm a cisgendered, middle-aged, straight white guy, so my role is to be an ally. But sometimes what these issues need are allies who are ready to step up and do that. So that's one of the places where I've tried to do it. And the school districts in learning what some of the movements have been. One thing for people to take lessons from, and I believe they've learned it, but we still need to be very aware of it. 10, 15 years ago, there was a movement by the conservatives to take over state legislatures, and
Was
they
that
did.
was that Alec? Or is that
That
am I
that
thinking of
that
something
was
else?
that was one of the features. Yeah, that was one of the organizations that was pushing this,
Mm.
and they saw state legislatures as places, again, like I just described, more direct community contact, but they were pushing policies that, frankly, I would, I would and will oppose until I'm gone. But their political strategy was to recognize that these smaller races that people often didn't pay attention to were ones that they could take advantage of, and also through broader strategies around gerrymandering and
Yeah, and it's low
those types of things.
low turnout elections that don't
Mhm.
cost very much
Yep.
Right.
are a good place to strike, as
Right.
which school
Right.
board elections fit into that same category.
Oh, very much
Exactly.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that that we've been recognizing. And I think, again, folks have caught on this time relatively well. I think
It doesn't
that
hurt that that so many of these conservatives are that that are pushing the school board takeovers and stuff have become such cartoon villain caricatures of themselves. I
yeah,
mean, the folks of I remember this state legislature stuff that was going on 10, 15 years ago, and a politics dork like me, it's like, oh, that guy's, that guy's a lobbyist. That guy's this, you know, but it wouldn't come off as obviously to, Joe and Jane low information voter. But these folks that are coming out now, my God, they're rabid. And
Yeah.
they're coming off with book bans and underpants inspections right off the bat. They don't even hide
Right.
it. It's like, yeah, put me in charge of your school and we'll make sure that there's an underpants inspection before gym. It's just
Yeah, they did a good job of getting elected, but they didn't they're a lot of them are losing right away.
oh
Like
yeah, well they can't make
as soon as people see what they're doing, they're like, whoa.
it's like Joe was you were talking about a few steps back about respect and being able to work across the aisle, work in concert with someone who you don't agree with on everything or even most things. The we last week Marty and I had a impromptu conversation with a buddy of mine who works in a he had some suggestions for how to grow the podcast, grow some, audience, help us support ourselves and support the podcast. And that's my buddy Steve. And, he and I have voted for vastly different people when we talk about, what, but we're closer together than we're farther apart. And the stuff that I don't agree with on him, he explains it to me in a perfectly rational and respectful tone of voice, and he listens to me back. And it's like maybe we agree to disagree, but that's the that's just how it is. And but
yeah,
we hold each other and we hold each other in respect and good faith, blah blah blah. And I wanted to shift gears a little bit because
okay.
this stuff about the what's going on in our school boards and boards, respect for the LGBTQ community. My own kid is like you. I'm the parent of a trans person. My kid lives up in Canada. I think I've mentioned that before, where Montreal and has much stronger protections about stuff like that, though they have they're he he goes on at least 2 or 3 protests a year, if not more. Um, but one thing we really have seen, I think, in a in our more general politics in the larger sphere is a real breakdown in respect. And I know that the legacy media would like it to be both sides, but it's not really both sides. We've seen a complete breakdown of norms, respect, anything from the Republicans towards Democrats. And I mean this generally. I'm not talking about individual folks who you may work with who, or who any of us might know, where it's like, well, blah, blah. I'm talking about the more general thing. And I'm wondering if you have anything you can speak to towards that in our own state house, because I've seen some stuff come out of our Pennsylvania, some of our Pennsylvania state reps, and I'm just like, what on earth are you thinking about? Scott Perry, for example, he's I'm like looking at him and I'm just like, dude, and wasn't he involved with the whole insurrection? Do I got that wrong, Marty? Am I missing that?
He absolutely was involved in the effort to, he was the whole false elector scheme.
Yeah.
He was also, as part of that, overthrow the election thing, remember they tried to replace the attorney general with an assistant attorney general for the environment or something like that.
Yeah, it was that weird pudgy face guy.
Yeah, and then the most of the Justice Department said, if you do that, we'll resign, and Trump backed down.
Yep.
Well, that whole thing was intended to send a memo to Georgia saying the Department of Justice has found irregularities, and give them an excuse to send two sets of slates of electors to Congress. And they wanted to try to do this in multiple states. And then that was how they were going to pull off their coup. So Scott Perry was involved in all of it. And yes, but I think we have a good candidate running against him, and I'm hoping that he may get bounced. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
That's right. They seized his cell phone.
But I think
Yep.
the most famous thing with the House the House Republicans in Pennsylvania was the whole thing with the January 6th booing the cops, right?
Right.
I mean,
I was on the floor when that happened, and
Give us a little background, real quick. This is the Capitol Police who were January 6th.
Yeah, I had met two. It was two of the police. One had been brutalized by the rioters and beaten up, and still is today suffering from the trauma of that event. But he was willing to stand up and talk about what that event really meant and the disrespect that had been shown to the police that were supposed to be empowered to protect the Capitol on that day, but the rioters didn't care about them. And so the two policemen who had been there, again, defending the Capitol, defending democracy, they were recognized from the floor by the Speaker of the House. There was actually even a statement in support of that from the Republican leader on the House floor, but a number of the Republicans did not support that, and they were vocal. And
That's disgusting.
they even went so far as to call them traitors right on the floor of the House. And I was on the floor the day that the officers who had defended the Capitol, and they had come and met with a number of us earlier, and we'd gotten to know them and understood that one of them in particular had been very badly beaten by the rioters, and he was still suffering from certainly the trauma of that. But they were brave enough to say, look, this is what happened that day. We were the police empowered to protect the Capitol, and we found ourselves in harm's way from U.S. citizens trying to take over the Capitol. There's nothing about that was anything more complicated than people doing criminal acts, what I would call treasonous acts, to try to impact and overthrow what the correct election result was.
To steal the votes of Pennsylvanians, among other states.
So you know, I'm all for people having the right to speak their mind about that, to speak their opinion about that, but to take violent action to do so is frankly crossing a line. And people can poo-poo it and say it wasn't that serious. For these two officers, it was that serious. For their colleagues who had lost their lives, there were a number of officers who committed suicide after.
Yep, I was just
There've
about
been
to say.
a lot of impact coming out of this, and none of it good for the officers, especially of the Capitol Police, but I think law enforcement everywhere. So we were recognizing them, and even the Republican leader of the House also favorably recognized them. Several Republican legislators decided to boo, to yell words like traitor, and frankly, it demeaned the institution and politics and you know, legislative. We're not perfect, and we're not some sanctimonious group of folks who are always going to do exactly the right thing, but we try to behave in a way that shows respect for our fellow human beings, and in particular for people who have been through difficult circumstances. And the lack of not just respect, but basic human decency in the way that the officers were treated that day really did bother me, and it continues to do so. Again, I will note it wasn't all Republicans, and there were even, again, the Republicans who did speak out favorably in recognizing these men and their sacrifices. But the undercurrent of the support for violence is really the most important thing that we've got to be looking at. And I will even say, and this is as a partisan politician, the peaceful transfer of power is even more important than who wins an election. And I just last weekend went to a seminar workshop where we were talking about the impact of election violence in the United States, and that we are looking at three things where there is a history of previous election violence, and we have that with January 6th. We also have it with the recent assassination attempt on President Trump. Those are both very direct examples and historical facts of when violence was used recently in a political way. We have a rhetoric of blame, and as you said, Brendan, I do believe it is mostly on the Republican side toward Democrats, but there is a rhetoric of blame for all that is wrong, and even in some situations, creating things that aren't even wrong, but still blaming. And then the third element is the idea that the first two things in particular have sowed doubt in the validity of our institutions and in the legitimacy of things, and in particular of election results. So these three things are out there, and there are some counterbalancing forces. There's a bipartisan group that gathered called Better Angels. They did a study, and they also convened their own group together, and from different parts of the country, and different political perspectives, different histories, and they focused on what is it that people want out of their elections, and really they want a sense of safety and security. They want every vote that is legally cast to be counted, and they want the people involved as candidates in the election to accept the results of the election. And these are the kinds of things that we can do to avoid violence. I'm hopeful that we can avoid it this time round, but I also know that it's not going to happen by accident. And we do have to be very careful of how we speak about issues, but almost more importantly about how we speak about those who oppose us. And we recognize common humanity as much as we can. We recognize, frankly, that 85 to 90% of social and political issues in this country are things that there is a very, very broad consensus on.
That was
And,
a theme in
yeah.
the convention that
Yep.
Obama hit, and Bill Clinton hit. And I think those were the two strongest voices, but they both spent a considerable amount of time during their primetime speaking slots talking about the differences on the other side. I think it was Obama who said, you might have an uncle or a relative or somebody who has some crazy political views, and you don't just automatically assume they're a bad person,
Right.
And I think Bill Clinton, I can't remember precisely how he framed it, but he had essentially the same message, which was, and this was in somewhat of a political, in other words, how do you win an election, rather than say, how do you get along? But
Right.
the idea is, that if you listen to people and you talk to them respectfully, you can get some of their votes. And I'll give you an example of why this is hard in an ironic kind of way, because Donald Trump explained exactly why it's hard. He had all these advisors telling him during the convention, leading up to it, and during it, to stop insulting everybody, to stop insulting Kamala Harris, calling her stupid and all these things. And then he gave a rally down in North Carolina, and he asked his audience, do you want me to stick to issues or do you want me to insult people? And they're like, insult people. And he's like, yeah, that's what I thought. Now my advisors are fired. And then
I remember that.
yeah, and then
Idiot.
he's like, he's like, I hate these people. I hate Obama. I hate Michelle. I hate Hillary. I hate Joe Biden. I hate Kamala.
Kamala.
Right? And so I want to express that. I want to insult them. But then he also said, look, they're over at the convention trashing me. Like, I want to hit back. And that's the type of thing where it's like this other side for Democrats that's got this Fox News, and they've got this right-wing radio, and they've got all these right-wing influencers, and they're just mean.
Yeah.
They're just
There,
mean. They're disrespectful. They go after Tim Walz's kid.
It's
Uh,
Gingrich. It's Gingricism on steroids. I was
and
just
it's like you just want to hit them back. It's so hard not to,
yeah.
but that's kind of playing into their hands a little bit.
I really enjoyed the way that that Michelle Obama put it at the convention. How, she, and she's well known for when they go low, we go high.
Yeah, she
Frankly, I'm
ditched
not
that.
frankly, I'm not sure how well that's worked out. But what she talked about how they go small and petty. They get
Yeah,
small and petty. And I think what Harris is doing, and I think what the Democrats have done is, yeah, we have hit back, but we've hit back in an appropriate way. I think the way we have hit back with we've taken we when Walls and Harris and their surrogates use the weird and the creepy thing, um, I think that is absolutely appropriate. It's not
it's not. It's not.
it's not mischaracterized. I mean, look, I
Look, it's
listen to
not
the way.
cruel. It's not cruel,
No,
right?
nobody's calling them. Well, there are some of them. Nobody is calling them traitors to their faces the way some of them, quite frankly, deserve to be called.
Right.
You're an insurrectionist, you're a traitor. I'm sorry. It's right there in the Constitution. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And we're not using that language. And we're not using cruel language. You know, it's 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 a very big difference. It's addressing the pettiness in my mind. To me, it is responding to the smallness and the pettiness. Like, why are you focused on underpants
Yeah.
inspections? That is freaking weird. I'm sorry, that's weird. That's like such. Who gives a shit? You know.
Yeah.
I have
Right.
bigger things to worry about. Why are you worried about woke? I'm trying to feed my family.
Right.
I'm trying to find the money to fix my car. Never mind buy a new one. You're talking about what clothes that person that isn't even your kid is wearing. What
Tampon Tim.
tampon Tim.
Yeah.
What's up? Why do you even care? Why do you
Right.
care?
Well, I'll tell you why I care from a different perspective, obviously, right? That uh, I I care because there is a difference in the way that uh, you look at things and then process them and then make your decision. And it's that idea of what folks would call discernment, figuring it out, basically.
Mhm.
They, how do you figure something out? And how do you take time? And one of the problems that we have is we're in an environment now where that's not what you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to immediately say what side you're on and pick up a sign and or something more harmful and go and engage. And so I think for me, why I care about how we handle things and the way in which we're talking about the issues and places and spaces where we disagree, and trying to do so in a way that's as respectful as possible. And I'll agree with you. I don't know that it is possible to always have respect, because sometimes your emotions take over and you're not going to respond in a particularly respectful way if it's your emotions talking. But what you got to do, if especially when you're looking at how do I engage with other people on, in my block, in my neighborhood, at the voting booth. What are my decisions going to be based on? And you don't want them based on knee-jerk reactions and emotions. What you want them based on is having figured it out.
Yeah.
And having taken the time to just sit back and relax and look at all sides as much as possible, even and almost especially those that disagree with you. And that's one of the cultures that we lost in the United States, I think. And you referenced it a little earlier. You talked about Newt Gingrich.
Yep.
That was one of the first spaces in my adult life in which the lack of respect for other people was made a central element of a political message.
He had a whole memo for Republicans about how to talk about Democrats. And one of them was never call it the Democratic Party. It was called the Democrat Party with the emphasis on rat. Call us traitors, bizarre, weird. They used weird at us, America hating, all, yep.
Yep. And I think that's what one of the things that's going to be our challenge is to point out the harshness, the dangerousness of all of these ideas, but to try not to make it as best we can personal. And this goes back to that idea of election violence. The studies have shown that there is a minusculely small portion of the population that even accepts violence as a mechanism and seeks it out as a tool in political rhetoric. 99% of the people out there do not want violence in our political systems.
Yeah, it's a small and loud minority.
Exactly. And what we have to be able to do, those people, they can, we'll go after them. And I do believe that Donald Trump is in that group of people. But I also don't believe that most of the people who are going to pull a lever for him or push a button for him in the ballot box are thinking, in that way. That's not what their thought patterns are. But they do have some very basic, again, commonalities with all the rest of us, starting with safe and secure spaces for all of us to live in. And I think the hitting on those common themes as your lead, and then hitting back against the opposition, against the name calling. And one of the interesting spaces where I think this is going to come a bit more to the fore, we've seen it in the past week coming out of the convention, the reactions to Gus Walls and Gus's pride and happiness, and again, raw emotion. Sometimes it's a good thing, right? Sometimes it's not. But for Gus, it was, because it was a joyful emotion. It was a positive emotion, and it was, this is what I'm feeling right now.
And remember,
and
that kid has a disability.
Yeah,
this is my point.
Yeah,
this is my point. We, those of us who are in tune with that, are able to recognize that and find our context for that behavior being normalized, because it is a piece of who he is and what his condition in the world is as a neurodivergent person.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've tried to do as a legislator, one of the other groups that I've focused on advocating for, because I don't see a whole lot of people out there doing it, is the disability community. And I do have a very small disability. I have a hearing loss that has meant that I've worn hearing aids ever since I was 6 years old.
I just lost I found my hearing aid after it was lost for 6 months, and then finally had it in again, and it got lost like within 3 weeks. I need to
no.
get a new one.
All right.
I understand
we're-
100%, my man.
When we get off this, I'll talk to you about the GPS tracking systems for your hearing aids. They work. So, but the things that I've looked at doing, and this is again in that teaching area as well, in order to be able to stop what people will have been calling the otherizing of our communities. The disability community is very large, but it is still marginalized. 1 out of every 4 people will be disabled in some way, shape, or form during their lifetime. The majority of families that are out there, the vast majority of families, have been impacted in one way or another by a family member's disability, and significantly so. So these are the spaces where people can begin to know, learn, and understand about the fact that the differences that are created when somebody has a hearing loss, they can't see, the sensory disabilities, they have mobility disabilities and need to use wheelchairs and canes, they have intellectual disabilities or neurodivergence that mean they don't talk the way other people do, or they don't process things the same way other people do. When people have folks like that in their lives, sometimes unintentionally, most of the times unintentionally, but sometimes very intentionally, those folks end up teaching what folks would consider to be their able-bodied friends and family members about what it means to be someone who lives with a disability. And so in my work, what I try to do is see the spaces where, as an ally, I can lift up and provide bully pulpits, the ability to have platforms from which people can talk about their experiences as disabled people, because with that being something that is so widespread within our society, it is one of the places where as people begin to see it and hear it, it becomes normalized, and then we stop the otherizing of people. We stop the making fun of people. We stop the bullying, and we begin, when we change those behaviors, we're also reducing the acceptance of those behaviors at higher levels, like a presidential candidate who's going to make fun of a news reporter who has cerebral palsy, which is exactly what Donald Trump
one of the
did
things
back in
that,
2016.
yeah,
After
this is one of the things where the Republicans get a lot of politics right. I mean, when some people talk about like appealing to the lizard brain or something, but one of the things they get wrong is it's exactly what you're talking about. Going after things that every family like recognizes in their own lives, like disability. Increasingly, as more people are comfortable coming out as gay or transgender or something, people also have that acknowledged in their families.
Yep.
And so
Yes.
it gets bullying and all that stuff, it gets reduced because everybody knows, oh, well, that's going after cousin so and so. And I have a personal experience. I used to go to a parents group for kids that have addiction, and there were people in there that were pretty powerful Republican staffers, right? That were like some of the best people that I've ever around. But we weren't there to talk politics. We were there to talk about our kids. Right. And the problems that they were suffering. And addiction is in some ways, very, very similar to disability, right? But everybody,
it is actually in the diagnostic the DSM, that it is a diagnosis of substance use disorder.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I do
So
want to point.
I was reluctant to say that in case I might like offend somebody because I didn't know, but yeah, it's a disability, obviously. Interferes with every aspect of your life.
I do want to note that after Gus Walls, stood up and was pointing and crying, and that there were a number of far right and Republican pundits that did in fact immediately try to otherize him, and
Oh, yeah.
and we're saying
And
horrible things about them.
And Coulter most famously.
And some people on the right were like that. I can't believe I'm going to say something nice about Eric Erickson, but he was just like Eric Erickson from Red State was like, that kid has a disability. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
right.
Blind
Yeah,
squirrel,
and that's why it's bad.
blind squirrel
That's why
finds nut, but
that's why it's bad
Right.
politics because they can't even rally around it themselves, right?
yeah.
So
Well, but this is where I'm going to get pushed back just a touch, because
Okay.
this is where, we with our liberal think we also have to recognize, there, it's not simply because Gus Walls had a disability, right? So we don't need to patronize him. We don't need to protect him. What we need are systems in place where, how he feels about things, how he thinks and processes things, that there's a way for us to incorporate and begin to understand and find the places where he can be our teacher in
Right.
as much and empower, not simply protect. So
Right.
we
Yep.
do have to we do have to be really, and that for me is one of the key aspects of what I would consider progressive politics, which is that we recognize not only the you don't do that kind of thing, you don't treat somebody that way, you don't, but also work to whatever that next step is to say, and how do we get it so that that person goes from the different stages of we're going to give them access, we're going to give them the ability to be a part of society, we're going to include them, and then we're going to recognize that they belong in ways that we don't necessarily have to be always consciously processing, that the idea of belonging will happen in a more natural way, and the acceptance of a person's disability simply comes in the, okay, how do we make sure this person is a part of what we're doing, as much as we can, and so it is, again, I think one of the places where we're getting there, we're moving, we are on an arc of progress in how we discuss this. But even those of us who consider ourselves enlightened and progressive, we still have to always be aware of how we're handling the interactions with folks who have differences from us, in order to be able to provide them power to continue the road of self-determination that we want all people to be on.
Yeah,
That's great insight. Made me think in a new way a little bit. So thanks for that, Jim.
yeah, thank you. It's about
Brandon, we gotta
about one-
wrap up. And one thing I wanted to ask Joe is, are we gonna get everyone to come out in Philadelphia and vote in this election the way we need them to?
Yep. So I'll let you guys know a few of the different things that we're doing locally in the River Wards. There are a couple different groups, and including one that is being led by myself and Senator Nikhil Saval, called River Wards Vote. And we are going to be actively door knocking. It's going to be neighbors talking to neighbors again, because that's one of the most effective ways And we are going to be talking to people about the issues, but then also making sure they have a plan to vote. They have their family members with plans to vote. In Pennsylvania, we're fortunate enough to have a 7-week mail-in voting time period. So
Nice.
there is a range of options to make sure that your vote does get cast, and the idea of making a plan and then following up. So one thing I will say to folks is this kind of thing sometimes can be on the annoying side. These programs, if we try to, recognize when somebody's done what they're supposed to do and they've mailed in their ballot or they've cast their vote, we leave them alone. But it is the kind of thing where maximizing the vote means making sure that you're checking both for yourself personally and for the people around you. What's the plan to vote? Making sure that is something that's a priority. Making sure that you're voting up and down the ballot. And I, as a Democratic official, obviously want everybody to be voting Democrat. I think that's the best way to go. But we absolutely, at the top ends of our ballots in Pennsylvania, need the Democrats to be elected and getting their margins. One of the other things we're doing politically is organizing the disability community and doing so in a way where we're going to be working on having people with different disability able to inform and be engaged in our process so that they're in control of how are we reaching out to their parts of the community the
Nice.
most effectively. And again, that's part of both the empowerment and the connection that we need to be making, is to be giving communities their own way of taking ownership of the right, power, and obligation to vote. So that's another aspect that I'm going to be focused on myself personally. I think writ large, I'm going to tell everybody what Michelle Obama just told everybody at the convention: do something.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Do something.
Absolutely. My mail-in ballot's already been requested. I've heard that's already, I got an email saying it's already being processed. Guys, we got to wrap this up. We all have stuff to do. Joe, thanks for being with us. That would be Joe Hohenstein, proudly representing the 177th District of Pennsylvania since 2019 and a lifelong Philadelphian.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Marty Longman for joining us as well. Folks, please like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, CastBox, iHeartRadio, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you would like to support us financially, drop by Patreon. You can find us there, patreon.com, Progress Pondcast. Leave us a couple bucks. I know that I very soon need to get a new hard drive. Both of us could use microphone upgrades. You can help us do that. If you support sensible, progressive talk, you should be supporting and listening to the Progress Podcast. I like to think we're a little bit different than the other podcasts out there. We get a nice conversation, not a heck of a lot of screaming, and we still manage to get some jokes in. So on behalf of everybody here, thanks for coming. Thanks for sitting in. Please share us with your friends. And as usual, our intro and outro music is provided by the magnificent, the wonderful, the Royal Hounds out of Nashville, Tennessee. Go check them out on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you find your music. Rock on, folks. Joe, I'll see you around the neighborhood.
I'll see you. Take care.
And Marty, I'll see you online.
Over and out.
Next 2 minutes talking about how we rescue animals in my house and all the work I do as an ACT board member. That's just absolutely suitable to have a dog barking in the background for. But we do actually. My wife has long had a soft spot for rescued animals, so she's basically passed that on to me. And our kids. So we have a wall of rescues that is somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 or 50 animals.
It was the same
Um,
with my mom growing up, and my
yeah,
cat. I adopted my cat because my friend Jess had to get rid of her. So she was like, "Can you take my cat?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And
yeah,
my
yeah,
dad's cat Smalley was a rescue from out back my house. He's sitting there on the table right now. And
yep.
my parents had evacuated Stephen. You never met my mom, Marilyn, but the my dad and my mom were had to evacuate New Jersey from one of the storms, and there was this little tiny orange cat out back that had figured out that if it was friendly, it would like get more food. And my dad was just like, Steve was like, Marilyn, we're not taking that cat home. We're not taking the cat. We're not adopting that cat. We're not adopting that cat. And now my dad has a cat.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's
Hey,
how it works.
we, yeah, no, we have a regular breakfast club out front of my house with Angel and Felicity. Those are the cats that mostly stay on the outside. And then we've got 5 inside, all rescues, and then our 3 dogs as well. A lot of them have different medical issues because my daughter for a while worked as a vet tech, and so and particularly difficult cases would sometimes come home with us to foster, and then we would fail at fostering and adopt them, and that's how we got
Yeah, that's how it
Chief.
always happens.
Wait, that's how we got Chief Hopper, our 3-legged dog, and Lieutenant Dan, our 3-legged cat. Um, so our next amputee is going to be named Captain Ahab.